Good morning. Today we will recognize 9 extraordinary young men for their dedication to service by inducting them into the Martin Luther King Jr. Society. We are honored to have with us today Mrs. Laura Knox, who has graciously agreed to begin our ceremony. Mrs. Laura Knox, a native of Nashville, was born in 1927, the daughter of Colonel and Mrs. Luke Lee. The original 864 acres of Percy Warner Park is the best-known legacy of Colonel Lee's generosity and foresight. Mrs. Knox graduated from Vanderbilt University with a Bachelor of Arts in 1947 and subsequently obtained a master's from the same institution in 1966. For several years, she taught at Park Avenue Elementary School and later traveled around the nation under the auspices of the Parent Involvement Project, where parents were encouraged to begin and become involved in their children's education. She married Bill Knox in 1953, and together they opened the Marketplace Cafe, one of Nashville's first integrated coffee shops. Mrs. Knox is a lifelong learner, a lover of nature, of art, of music, and of life in general. Perhaps poet Edgar Lee Masters had someone like Mrs. Knox in mind when he wrote, "It takes life to love life." Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mrs. Laura Knox.
I am thrilled to be here. I'm so grateful to Michael for inviting me. Thank you. I want to congratulate the people who are going to be installed in this society today and the ones who are already the members. Oh, all right. Thank you very much. Michael asked me to say a little bit about Nashville back in the 60s, and it was a turbulent place, and the same I think could be said for cities all over the South in particular. Just a few references. I remember vividly the Sunday morning when my family was on our way to church, and there were tanks stationed at the end of Belmead Boulevard. I assumed they were National Guard tanks. I never knew. And I don't know whether they were in connection with the speech by Stokely Carmichael, who'd been on the Vanderbilt campus without any incident of any kind, or whether it was in preparation for the next night when he went to North Nashville to speak, and there was a huge riot over there. This was going on all over the South, as I said, because of the terrible, terrible things that were happening because of segregation. Some friends of mine who had come here from Boston went down to the Woolworth's counters on Fifth Avenue. The people who were being trained in nonviolence were being trained at various churches, and the pastor of one of the churches said to the people who were doing the training, "Would you please say you're training the children? If I tell my parishioners you're training the students, they might be concerned, but nobody would be upset if you say you're training the children." David Halberstam was in Nashville working on the Tennessean at that time, and he has written a remarkable book called Children, and I commend it to you to read about that time in what was going on in the South. It was for me a time of wakening up and becoming aware. I want to say something about the sit-ins. The people who were trained in nonviolent resistance would go down to the Woolworth's counters on Fifth Avenue. They could go in the store, the African Americans could, and buy any merchandise, and their money would be accepted, but they were not served at the lunchroom counter. And they were taught in ways of nonviolence to sit there very calmly with their hands on their knees, look straight ahead, and not say a word. There were some angry white people who came in and would hit them in the back, put burning cigarettes on their neck at times. I think I could sit straight and look ahead if people were just saying ugly things about me. I'm not sure I could sit straight and look ahead if people were putting burning cigarettes on my neck. One time, friends of ours had moved here from Boston, and she went down and stood behind the men at the counter and said very calmly, "You're doing the right thing. We're grateful that you're here. Please continue." My friends were Jewish, and of course the 1960s were just 20 and 30 years after Hitler had done so much to the Jewish relatives they had in Germany. I did not know until this past summer when I was in Maine and was visiting with their daughter that every morning after Halloween, when they lived in Nashville, my young friend had been at Hillsborough High School during that time, but every morning when they left to drive out of the driveway, there was a swastika that had been painted on the gate post and a much larger swastika on their driveway every single year that they lived in Nashville back during that time. For me, it was truly a time of growing up and being aware. My husband's, at that time, there was no place in Nashville where black people and white people could come and sit down and just have a cup of coffee together. So my husband started something called the Marketplace down on West End, just before you get to Centennial Park. It was a very exciting place. All of us who worked there were volunteers. We'd had a good bit of training and sensitivity training. We were there to listen to people, not try to convert anybody about anything. And the conversation was just always very stimulating. One night, a group of people from my church went down to the marketplace, and the sight of white people and black people seated at the same table was horrifying for many of them. And I can still see the expressions on their face. I knew all those people. We were all in the same church together. But the next day, they voted to close the marketplace. They had been putting a little bit of money toward our rent. But the Board of Missions in Atlanta kept calling my husband and saying, no matter what they say, keep it open, you're doing the right thing. It was a very exciting place to go. Everybody there, as I said, was a volunteer. We were open 3 nights a week. The programs were wonderful because the person in charge knew a lot of people in theater groups in Nashville, in classical music groups, in contemporary music. So it was a very stimulating place to be. I was going to say one other thing about that, and I can't think what I was going to say right now. I want to go back to John Lewis. I saw him on Meet the Press just Sunday, a couple of days ago, and he was talking about being in Nashville during that time. He was a seminary student at a Baptist seminary here in Nashville. He's now completing his 17th year as a congressman from his district in Georgia in the United States Congress. And he was saying, we sat in, we sat down, but we grew up in Nashville. And he is so complimentary of the time he was here and of all the work that was done here. Nashville is a very exciting place, as I said a minute ago, because there is room for growth. And I commend to you, as you leave this place, you've had this splendid education here at MBA, and your next academic career, I'm sure, will be equally challenging and wonderful. But wherever you go in the community, I urge you to become involved, to become informed. Get on the parking commission, get on the school board, get on the PTA, do something, because your community will be richer because of what you do there. MBA has been a historic institution all my life in Nashville. And I commend what you're doing here, and all of you students, wishing you the very best of luck in the future. Thank you for the ones in the group and the ones about to be involved with the Nashville Symphony as a volunteer, not because of any musical ability, I assure you. The second Sunday after we married, my husband had asked me not to sing in church, and he later asked me not to sing to our children. But I love symphonic music because of concerts I'd been taken to as a teenager. And at the time, everybody who played in the Nashville Symphony was a volunteer, a lawyer, a doctor, a band director, a teacher, whatever. But finally, in the early 70s, we got enough money to hire a full-time quartet. And they came out to our home to do a warm-up because they were going to do programs in the community just to let people know that they were in existence. And we had old 25 people at home listening to them. It was just a magical evening. One of the members of the quartet, Booker Rowe, a graduate of Temple University, was African American. The other 3 were white. And as the party ended and I was walking to the door with a couple, he said to me as he opened the screen door, "Don't you ever ask us back if you're going to have any niggers here in the house." Had he slapped me in the face, I could not have been more stunned. This was a couple we had seen a lot of. We were in groups with them that met with other couples once or twice a month. That was just the atmosphere, though, that many people had in Nashville. And it's terrifying when I think about that. We have come a long way, but there's a way to go. Thank you for letting me come back.